Hello. So for this next segment, I thought I'd give a little background to kind of explain where my thought process came from and how things sort of started out for me and why I got myself in the position that I did and why my journey started the way it did. I'm going to have some chamomile tea today. It's one of my favorites. I just like it. Even though some people think it tastes like dirt, I really like it. So I grew up fundamentalist Christian, and I actually didn't know that there was a difference until a couple years ago. And I just thought Christian was Christian and everything else wasn't Christian. Took me a while to know that there were different variations within the Christian faith, and some were more charismatic, some were less so, some were more structured, and others weren't quite as much. But yeah, I definitely grew up fundamentalist Christian, and the Shiny Happy People documentary that came out, to put it like on a sliding scale, I definitely wasn't as far along as like the Duggar family. We didn't wear matching jumpers, but a lot of my friends did. And so I was kind of from a family that was a little bit more relaxed by those standards, but the mentality of the man being the one that decides everything, the man being the one who's in charge, and the women just kind of preparing the way, I guess, and making things easier for said man. That's how I was raised. And I was raised to think that the only purpose of a woman was to help her husband and raise children. And so that colored my entire worldview. My whole life, my whole childhood growing up was focused on becoming compliant and pleasant and agreeable so that I could attract a reasonable man who then I would basically serve, honestly. My parents came from a very different background, and I always say this part of the story because I don't think that they knew what they were doing, and I don't think that they understood the ramifications that would just naturally come of that sort of dynamic. But they both came from very difficult backgrounds that were very unhealthy in their own way, and they were trying to choose a different path. And I think they, with good intentions, went too far in the other direction. Just as someone who can now look on it from a different perspective, they just went too far in the other direction. And there are just natural consequences of that. And I think as a parent myself, I can easily understand that they had good intentions, and if they could go back, they could change it. But none of us can go back. And I can know, even as I'm still smack dab in the middle of raising my kids, if I could have made different choices with my first, things would have been better all around. But unfortunately, we only have the choices that we have in the present moment, and we can't go back. So we can acknowledge that it could have been better, while still being grateful that the individual did have good intentions. And I think that's a interesting place to be in, but it's important to acknowledge that as damaging as it was, and as it did set me up for a really bad marriage, that was not the intention of my parents. They were trying to do the opposite. Unfortunately, it's just how life is. We can't see the future. We don't know what our choices are going to bring. So it set me up to basically be a doormat. And I know a lot of people that I've talked to who've kind of gone on the same journey as I have experienced the same situation where they were a doormat for years and years and years. And it was more than just romantic relationships. It was in every single relationship, in every dynamic relationally. They became the people pleaser, the doormat kind of anxiety ridden individual who was just trying to get ahead of everybody's wants and needs so that there could be peace. And in the process, they lost themselves repeatedly. Their wants and needs didn't exist. And there's some interesting research now, and specifically on how the body keeps score from all of that kind of situation where you're just shoving things down and shoving it down. And there's a lot of physical things that happen to our bodies because we're constantly shoving down our wants and needs and putting ourselves on the back burner. And I think a lot of us come to a place kind of in our middle age era where we can't do that anymore, and we're faced with the choice of continuing that and declining, or saying, no, I'm not going to do that anymore, and making better choices for our own health and safety. And unfortunately, so many of us have gone on that path, and we can look back on it and wonder, how in the world did we put up with what we put up with for so long? And it's just unfortunate that we couldn't learn it sooner. But I'm hoping that through sharing some of these stories that some people will learn it a little bit sooner than I did and have a little bit more of their life left after they draw that line in the sand than I did. But the fundamentalist view definitely shaped my world, and all I cared about was becoming a wife and mother. And I didn't really think about what kind of life that would be for myself. And I want to be careful to say that it's not a dig on anyone who aspires to be or a wife or a mother, but rather that in my position, there was never any other alternative. This was the path of a woman. There was no choice in my upbringing. This was what all women were created to do, and there was no way around it. So my only hope was to find a man who could provide. And that was the biggest thing, because I wasn't going to be expected to work. I was told I shouldn't even bother with college because I'd be quitting whatever job I had and raising kids anyway, so it didn't matter if I got a degree. That's just a very different experience than people are having today, but that's the life that I grew up in, and that's what prepared me for the path that I unwittingly started on.